Okay, we are back with the speed run, starting at 500, going up to 2200. We're into the 1500s now. The games are getting tougher. Let's fire up a game and see what we've got. We're playing 5+5. This is a good mix of, we can get some games in pretty quickly, but still have some time to talk about the ideas. I start with knight f3, c5, g3. Black goes for c5, which is actually quite a good response to knight f3, although not that common at this rating level, but it's very solid. And in this position, my usual setup is castle, but here black is threatening to play e5 and take over the center. So I like to play d4 rather, to disrupt that and offer a sort of reversed Grünfeld, where black can build a big center, but we're going to attack it. Bishop d7. Does this allow bishop takes d5? How would my opponent punish me in that case? Bishop takes d5, queen a5, check, knight c3 seems okay. Knight takes d4, e takes d4, bishop c6, bishop takes c6, check, bishop e6. Yeah, I don't actually see anything wrong with just grabbing this pawn, so I'm going to go for it. So we'll see if, okay, so our opponent seems to agree with us. And I think I can just play knight takes c6 here and trade down a bit. I could also just retreat the bishop. That would be totally fine. But I'm going to take this. And if bishop takes, I'm already up a pawn, so I don't mind trades. And in this case, I'll just go back. And I've given black an isolated pawn as well. So it's castle. So looks like we're starting out the opening up a clean pawn. So pretty happy with that. I think I'm actually good. So I can play knight c3. I'm going to try knight d2 and try to maneuver my knight to this square to pressure e5, and also look at this weak d6 square. And let's offer a bishop trade. When you're ahead material, generally you don't mind trades, so happy to offer that. So let's see now. I could take knight takes b6 and get the bishop pair. Knight d6 is also interesting. I would force that rook to move. I don't know if that does a ton for me. I think I'm just gonna take the bishop pair and keep it simple, and bring my queen in here and maybe think about doubling. I'm also attacking this, although I have to watch out for rook up. Yep. I don't mind that though, because the rook is, that puts the rook on kind of a awkward square. Let's just go back to d2. So I'm planning to double on the d file next. Bishop h3 is also something to watch out for. Increasing the pressure on this piece. So I think rook e7 is forced. Black has to defend that again. But then I'm going to play bishop g5. Now that I think about it, bishop g5 immediately would also have been extremely strong. I think I'm in good shape either way. I think bishop g5 first would have been even better, because my opponent's best option here might be to do something like queen e7 and give up an exchange. But after bishop g5, I'm not sure if they could even have saved that piece. I guess rook e7, bishop g5, rook b7, and black rather, is just barely sort of holding on to that piece. But I am still up a pawn. So the threat is to take on f6 and then take on d7, but this just allows me to take here, so think my opponent missed that, and I could trade, but I can even play bishop takes f6, defending my rook, and I'm up a whole rook at the end of all this. And the opponent resigns. So that really came down to just grabbing this this pawn right here with bishop takes d5. I've noticed a lot of players will take a free piece in the opening, but often will just let an opportunity for a free pawn like this pass. Anything, you know, if it's for free, I'll definitely take a pawn. Okay, let's get on to the next game. That was a pretty smooth game. e4, c5. We are going to play the Sicilian and the Nimzovich Sicilian with knight f6. I like to play this offbeat line, take the opponent usually out of their preparation. This is pretty rare. Sort of like a cross between the Sicilian and an Alekhine. Knight c3 is a good move. Generally don't like to take because after knight takes d takes c3, white gets a lead in development. So we just defend this knight. And here, I think I'm going to play knight b6. Bishop d3 is kind of an odd move, blocking the center pawn. Just play knight c6. So I could play d5. c4 is also kind of tempting. Let's just go d5. I think this is the simple way. White can capture en passant, but then I can develop my bishop. This bishop right here is just kind of awkwardly placed. Generally, you don't want your bishop blocking a center pawn. But if white doesn't take, I'm going to have essentially a French defense type structure, except white's bishop is misplaced, preventing them from using the d pawn. So I do think white should capture en passant here. But now I get to develop my bishop, and I'll just keep developing with castles most likely. I don't think I really care that much if white takes my bishop, so I'm just going to ignore that and castle. This does give my opponent the bishop pair, but I'm kind of gaining a lead in development here. I might go for e5 and expand in the center and develop my bishop this way. They're going to have to figure out a way to get their dark squared bishop out. Maybe b3 is what white should do. But I think I would play e5. You can also think about knight d5, f4. You know, the fact that that would hit a queen now is making knight d5 more appealing. Let's give this a shot. Generally, the knight's not well placed on b6 anyway, so I think I'm happy to get this guy back to the center. White is perhaps plotting queen e4, but I could answer that with f5. Just have to be careful not to get checkmated, obviously. Bishop e4. I think I'm going to go ahead and play knight f4, get my knight to this nice square with tempo. Maybe knight d4 here. Yeah, let's take. And white has to really watch out for f5 now. This bishop is a little bit short of squares. Queen g3, obviously, there's a puzzle rush tactic, knight e2. Queen f3, f5. Okay, bishop takes b7, bishop takes b7, queen takes b7. I think that looks like a good pawn sacrifice for me, because then white's remaining piece is going to be very restricted. So I'm thinking about maybe d3 here to lock that in. I could also throw in rook b8. Not sure if I want to do that just yet. Let's just play d3 for starters. Make sure this bishop can't come out easily. So I think I like the compensation I have for a pawn here, because these two pieces, the bishop and the rook on the queen side, are very trapped in. All right, let me just move out of the way with check. And I think I can just take on c2. That's a pretty juicy pawn. Now got a pass pawn one square away from promotion. Yes, I know it's blocked right now, but still, it's pretty dangerous for my opponent to have that. And if I can force this queen off the long diagonal, a check here could also be extremely dangerous. Just put my knight here. And next, I'm thinking if I can play rook b8, then white's queen would have to move off the diagonal. And I would get to come in with queen d5. Notice that bishop and rook is a massive problem if you have pieces that are not involved in the game and are stuck and can't get out. I'm actually threatening to, come to think of it, if I could play rook fb8, I think the queen is just trapped outright. It has no safe squares. Now, that wouldn't have worked the previous move because this knight is defending this. So if I played rook fb8 here, queen f3 would have saved it. I could still have played knight d4 with a good position. But sometimes the threat is stronger than the execution. So that's what we're going for. And my opponent seems to agree because they're thinking for a long time and having trouble finding a good move, it seems. I guess one way to save the king would be king g2, and this queen can go back. Okay, I don't think that answered the threat. I guess my opponent, what they want is rook b8, bishop f4. Rook b8, bishop f4. If I take the queen, it'll be a trade, but I can play queen takes f4, sacrifice my queen. If g takes f4, rook takes b7, I'm ahead of bishop. If queen takes a8, though... Wait, queen takes a8, queen c7. The queen's trapped anyway. Does that work? I think it does. Yeah. So I think this works. Could have also played rook ab8. That might have been simpler. But this line is cool. Bishop f4, queen takes f4, queen takes a8. If I take the queen, my queen would get taken, and I would be down in exchange. By queen c7, I'm temporarily down in exchange, but white's queen is trapped. At least that's the plan. Hopefully I'm not miscalculating here. Okay, well this is relatively simple, because now I'm just up a whole knight. And the opponent resigns. Okay, apparently the engine thinks I played well. Let me just show you this line, because this is a pretty cool one. Takes, so the critical line was if white takes here, and if I take that, white would take my queen, I'd be down in exchange. But queen c7, this is covered, this is covered, this, 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 this. Every single square is covered. I win the queen at the end. Nice. All right, let's play one more. Maybe if we get a really high rated opponent, we could even get up to 1600, but it'll probably take 2 more games. All right, knight f3. And we are getting this reverse Grünfeld, playing d4 so as black can't just grab the whole center really easily with e5. I will pre-move this recapture. Black has some options here. They can play c takes d4. They could also play knight f6, e6. Okay, so they're going for the reverse Grünfeld line, and we want to start pressuring that center with c4. This is our game plan here. We kind of provoked black to build that big center, so now we want to attack it. So we're going to play c4, knight c3, and so on. Now, knight f6, bishop e6, black has to defend d5. D takes c4, not really an option because bishop takes c6 check with a fork would be coming in there. So opponent already spending some time. This is one thing I like about this opening. Get your opponent into something they haven't really seen before. Make them spend some time, kind of confuse them. e4, probably not a very good move. It's another pawn move overextending the center. I'm going to take first. I'm not sure if it's better to, I mean, queen a4 also looks good. Knight c3 immediately looks good. Let's just play knight c3. Sometimes it's useful, this pawn can be a target, so I don't necessarily want to exchange that off. But I'm just developing and putting more pressure on black's center. So if knight f6, bishop g5 is possible. Also just consider castles, queen a4. Bishop b4 pinning. I'm just going to castle out of this pin. And if black wants to trade off their bishop, I'm fine with that. Then my bishop would get a nice diagonal. Could also have played c takes d5 there, trying to set up queen a4 check. But black could then have traded on c3. That's also looks very promising. So let's see, if bishop takes c3, I'll certainly recapture. I should probably try something like knight f6 or maybe knight e7. See, I can take on d5 now. I think I'm going to do this now because if black recaptures with the pawn, I have a tactic with queen a4 check. So this kind of forces them to make a decision, maybe trade my knight, which I would be happy to see. Okay, I could play bishop a3, but I think I'm actually just going to play c4. I don't really want to give up this bishop. I'm just going to keep trying to break down black's center, hopefully while keeping my bishops. So one thing I'm threatening is to take on d5 followed by taking on e4 with an extra pawn. So if black castles, I think I'll just go ahead and take on d5. If d takes c4, trading queens and taking on e4 certainly looks really good. Could also move my queen and keep the queens on the board, but I think trading queens, if it forces black's king to go to d8 and not allow them to castle, looks quite good. Okay, my opponent going really low on time, going under a minute potentially. Don't really see a great move for black here. Like bishop e6. C takes d5, queen takes d5, queen a4 check would still win a pawn. Yeah, very hard for black to protect their king and get that out of the center and protect this overextended pawn center at the same time. Let's just hit that bishop and bring our rook into the game with a tempo. If rook b8, I could already play bishop f4 and win an exchange, because the rook is tied to the bishop. Okay, bishop c6. Do I want to take on d5? C takes d5, queen takes d5. Looks okay, but I could also just play bishop a3. If d takes c4, queen c2. This looks quite good as well. Just trying to make it difficult for black's king to escape the center while still developing. I think I can take on d5 now, though, because how is black going to recapture? If queen takes, that hangs this knight. If bishop takes, queen takes, queen takes. If knight takes, bishop takes f8. So my opponent agrees, I guess, and just lets me take that pawn, but now I'm getting one and even a second center pawn if I want, which I do. So up 2 pawns. This should be a pretty straightforward win from here. Let's defend our bishop and also threaten this. Just bring the rook in. Gonna maybe set up a battery here. I think I can send this H pawn in now to try to soften this up. Maybe just d6 now. Usually a good idea to push a passed pawn. That opens up this diagonal and also this coming in here. Okay, e2 is threatened. Do I care about that? Yeah, a little bit. Seems like I should probably have... Well, okay, I'll just defend it for now. That's fine. I'm up 2 pawns, so don't really need to rush anything here. Just clamp down on these light squares. Pin this and get ready to play queen d5. So black can take on e2, but then I would play queen d5. Is there a good discovery on that rook? Maybe queen g4. Threatening bishop takes e5 and rook c8. So I think I can just go for a queen trade here. Black actually can't take because that would lead to a back rank mate. So my opponent does lose on time. All right, 3 for 3. We are knocking on the door of 1600. That's going to be it for today. If you want to learn more about the openings, the Réti and the Nimzovich Sicilian, check out my chessboard courses in the video description, and subscribe if you want to see how we go all the way up to 2200. I will see you next time.